Welcome to Austin Eras, where we explore Austin's transformation into a 21st century boomtown and the voices shaping its past, present, and future.
Welcome to the Austin Eras podcast. I'm your host, Adam Flagg, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest today, Gay Gaddis. Gay is a pioneering entrepreneur, artist, and civic leader who founded T3, also known as the Think Tank, in 1989 by cashing in a $16,000 IRA. T3 became the largest woman-owned independent advertising agency in the United States, and she worked with brands like Dell, UPS, Marriott, and Microsoft. She built a business culture centered on innovation, family, and risk-taking, including launching T3 and Under, a groundbreaking in-office childcare program. Beyond business, Gay is an accomplished painter with exhibitions across the country and operates a working ranch, Double Heart Ranch, and Fossil Ridge Art Studio and Gallery. She's an author of Cowgirl Power, How to Kick Ass in Business and Life. She's deeply involved in civic life and is the former chair of the Texas Business Leadership Council and past president of the Texas X's. Her legacy includes mentoring women through partnership programs like Women Who Mean Business and the upcoming Texas Trailblazers initiative at UT. She's a proud Longhorn, a real cowgirl, and one of the most influential female entrepreneurs to shape Austin's rise as a creative and tech hub. Welcome to the Austin Eras podcast, a true Texas Trailblazer, Gay Gaddis.
Well, hello, Adam. Thanks for having me here today.
A lot of T's. Texas Trailblazer. We're so excited. You've done a lot. You've really done a lot here in Austin. You've really made your way in this city in some really spectacular ways. And we're really excited to have you. I first got to meet you through the Texas Business Leadership Council, which you served as the first ever female chair of that organization. And watching you advocate and really work on issues around Texas has been a pleasure. And you stayed involved after all these years.
I've been a member for a very long time, and I was one of the first women to even become a member. And I was invited when Governor Perry was in office many years ago. And, it was still the Governor's Business Council back in the old days. Okay. And so we eventually changed it many years ago to Texas Business Leadership Council because it fit more into the national scene of other business councils in different states, and that's who we were partnering with. And so, it's been a great organization for me, and it keeps me involved in some of the key issues that make a difference in Texas.
And you are a true Texan. You were born in Texas, Liberty, Texas. Is that right?
I was born in Houston, but we moved to Liberty when I was a tiny child. I'm the first Texan in my family.
Okay, so you have Midwestern roots at Missouri?
Yes.
And so you grew up in Liberty. And tell me a little bit about your first impressions of Austin, because you discovered that, 12 years old?
Well, yes, I first came here on a trip with my parents. My dad was an engineer, and so every year he had to come in for certifications with the state. And so they brought me one year when I was 12, and I got to see Austin for the first time. See the Capitol. I think we stayed at the Villa Capri, now defunct, famous though hotel or motel in Austin, and just kind of the sights around town.
So as you got to know Austin a little bit more, I know one of the defining moments for you was coming to a UT football game in high school. Tell me about the game. Tell me what really made that impact on you.
Well, I got to go to a few games with my mother and some of her friends, and then I came to visit some friends who were at UT from Liberty. And when they took me to the game, and I cannot remember who we played that day, but it didn't matter because it all was about Texas for me. And so, but I saw it through a different lens. I saw it as a potential student, and I walked in, and it just was stunning because I thought, wow, this is like 10 times my small town in this whole stadium. Look how many people are here. And when they all started singing Texas Fight and, the Eyes of Texas, I thought, boy, I want to be a part of this. It was just so compelling to me, just the spirit and the excitement. And I couldn't think of anything better than to move here and go to UT.
And I read somewhere that you were an entrepreneur even early in your life. And that you were always involved in civics, that you organized a parade in your town when you were young?
Very young. This is a funny story because I was an only child, and my mother went to Houston one day, not too far from Liberty where I grew up, and came home with a majorette costume. And so I put it on and paraded around the yard and the house, and then I kind of thought, well, these are for parades, or the majorettes are leading a band or leading a parade. So I asked my mom, I said, can I have a parade? And she said, well, yeah, but you have to go get people to be in your parade. So I did. And I wandered up some dirt streets, believe it or not, in Liberty, Texas, and invited children to participate in my parade, of which they did. They decorated their dogs and their little go-karts and all these things and played tonettes. It was hilarious. A 4-year-old, though, and our parents all got together and we did this, and I marched down the street with the whole group of children behind me. So that was my first real time to lead something.
I love that. So leadership, when you think about leadership starting at a young age, are leaders born? Are they made? How do you view that? Because you've done a lot of leading in your life.
I have to say it's both, because I believe that you have to have some influence in your life that will encourage you to do this. But you have to have something in your DNA, and I really believe this, that allows you to take on that kind of responsibility. And some kids and, some people are just not wired up that way. And they're great, because they are the ones who would be in the parade and make it wonderful, because a leader without someone in their parade is not a leader anymore.
That's right.
So I believe, though, that it's a little of both. And I showed those characteristics, and people in my small town, not just my parents, but other people, gave me opportunities and saw that in me, and I would jump at it. I would do it. And some children would be afraid, but I said, no, I'll take it on. And so I did from a pretty young age.
So you get to UT and you're a student there with 10 times the size of Liberty in the football stadium. What kind of leadership, what kind of things did you learn at your time at Texas?
Well, I found out I was a very small fish in a big pond, where I'd been the opposite in Liberty. I'd kind of become a big fish in a small pond there. But I got there and I realized right away that it was really important to identify with some groups, because if you're just one of the 40,000, it's really daunting. I joined a sorority, Pi Beta Phi. Eventually, I became in leadership there. I joined other groups. I got on the Cactus yearbook staff. I was in Mortarboard, which is an honorary society. I was in another spirit organization. And in all of those, I tried to find a place to lead, or at least be significant. And that was really good for learning for me, that I could do it outside of Liberty, Texas, and it gives you confidence. And so I also was an art major, which is kind of uncanny since I'm a business person, really. But I was an art major in school, and I needed to make money. My father died when I was 13, and so I was working from the time I was 13 on. I had a job in Liberty, Texas, and I continued to work in Austin. And one of my jobs was to be a teaching assistant, and I got paid for that, plus I got a lot of my tuition and supplies covered through a scholarship. So I was just kind of, already taking things on. And when you're a teaching assistant, you're leading a class. Even though the professor's there, you have a lot of responsibility. And so that was another example of taking on a leadership type role early.
So you go through your schooling in Austin. Let's talk a little bit about Austin at that time. Because I know Austin, you go back a little ways, it was a lot smaller. It's doubled in size almost every 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
What was there to do as a student around Austin when you were there?
It was an interesting place. We had Barton Springs, we had Deep Eddy. But, I'll say, and so I'm going to tell you this was in the 70s. We were real involved in things at UT, at least the group that I was involved with. And so we did so much at UT, and we weren't driving all over the place. I mean, we went to Worst Fest. We had things, we did some things. We'd go to the out-time football games if they weren't too far. But we were there, and we were on campus, and our lives revolved around that for the most part. Unless you had a job off campus or something, which I did not. Mine were always on campus. So, we were just there. But, going to restaurants was so funny. There were like a handful of restaurants back then. Now, Austin is flush with some of the top restaurants in the country. But, we had, a steakhouse. We had Sid's, which is just a funny restaurant on Lamar, which is down where the post office is on North Lamar. We had Luby's Cafe.
Luby's, classic.
These were the kinds of things. And some Mexican restaurants.
I heard you like Dirty Martin's. Is that right?
Oh, I did. I always loved Dirty's, and it's still there, thank goodness, today. I was there not too long ago.
It's amazing it survived all this time. It's an amazing institution. So tell me, though, about graduating from UT. So you get out of UT and you moved to Dallas.
I did. And I was supposed to go to New York. Okay. Because I was a top student in my class. And so my teacher expected me to go to work in an advertising agency in New York because that's where I could make money. And if you dial back into the earlier days of advertising, look at Mad Men. I don't know if you all watched that, but they drew everything. So if I wanted to show you an idea, Adam, I would draw it. This was a comp. So I could do all that. And so I got a job, I actually had a job lined up in New York, but I was kind of wanted to get engaged to a guy who was in dental school in Dallas. So I went to work in Dallas at the Richards Group and learned a lot. But it was a tough job for me. It was a very tough transition. And I graduated in 3.5 years, so I was pretty young. And here I was out, trying to make a living and learn a new industry, really. I mean, I was an art major. So it was fascinating. And I knew right off the bat what frustrated me is I didn't know the language of business. I did not take one business course at UT, all art and then the other requirements. And so I went back to school at night to work on business classes because I just wanted to know what people were talking about. And I felt very left out that I didn't understand just, common language of business for one thing.
And that was in Atlanta, right?
Well, first started in Dallas
okay.
because I was there, and then I worked for Baylor Medical Center as the PR director, way too young. That's one of those things where people would say imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But I took the job first as a media relations, and as a set of circumstances unfolded, I was promoted to be the director of public relations. I was 23 years old. I mean, that's ridiculous, really, because it was a big job. But I was scared I couldn't do it, but I did it. And I asked the head of the whole medical center. I went in one day and I said, I'm afraid I'm going to screw this up. And we were pretty good friends. And he said, the fact that you walked into my office and told me that means you're not. So get back to your office and do a great job. And that gave me so much confidence. And so from that point on, I thought, if someone taps you to do the job, they believe enough in you to do it. And you may have to work harder and you may have to learn a lot and step it up, but someone's watching you and thinks that you can do it. So that's what I tell people all the time in leadership programs. Don't worry about that. If someone thinks you can do it, I bet you can.
Yeah. So later you get to Atlanta.
I did go to Atlanta. As I mentioned, my first husband was in dental school, and then he went to an orthodontic program at Emory. So we moved lock, stock, and barrel to Atlanta, never left Texas. That's where I lived. And I had an interesting experience there. I was going to go back to work in an ad agency, but I had another offer with a company that did leadership training, management consulting, and they were strategists and all this. 4 guys who'd gotten their MBAs at Harvard together. And they said, you got to go back to school and get your MBA. You've started on your coursework. You've got to do it. So I went to Georgia State and I worked for them and learned so much. I mean, I promise you, a lot of the tenets that I carried through business and my leadership skills were really honed by working with them, because we would go in companies, work with leaders in the companies, build team building exercises, and then they would move into strategy and planning and all that. But my real job was to kind of help these teams develop and working with them and doing personality assessments and trying to help people find who they were. And all of that just became the cornerstone of who I was, really. And I learned so much about myself. That's what was the key.
You learned a lot about mentorship, and now you're applying those post your sale of your business. So It's interesting to watch you return the favor of all that you learned.
It's funny how life will come around like that. But I really feel like we sometimes learn so many things along the way that you can then apply later. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes people who've been around for a while very useful. Because if you know how to apply that and you take action, you can really help people and you can make a difference in their lives.
Well, tell me about your return to Austin. You were in Atlanta. You got this. You were working at this great company. What gets you back to Austin, and what happens in Austin?
Once again, we had an opportunity. My husband got a partnership opportunity in Austin, and I have to tell you, I love Austin. I did even then, but to me, that was a big step back. Mm-hmm. Here I was in Atlanta. I mean, not like a New York or even Dallas, but it was a big city. And I was making my own way there, and I liked that. Mm-hmm. And here we come back to Austin. Austin's still a sleepy little town. I mean, dial back 80s, oh my gosh. I mean, it changed so much in the last few years, but you can imagine. I mean, yes, some things had changed a little bit, but not much since when I had graduated from UT. So it was a little town. But Fortunately, things kind of worked out.
So you were working at another agency, and you were doing your thing. And what was the moment that you went, I think I could do this on my own? I'm going to take
Well,
my
I
money.
kind of was forced to make a decision, really, because we all entered into a serious recession in the late 80s. And I was doing really well in the company I was in. And I had the largest book of business of anyone in the company, and I was making more money for them than anybody in the company. So I knew how to run accounts. But we all dove into this recession, and it was really serious. I mean, Texas was particularly hard. Savings and loans failed. Real estate wasn't worth the dirt it was built on. It was a rough time. So I came up with a business plan to turn around the company. And I made a fatal mistake that anyone listening should remember. You don't ever do something like that without bringing along the leadership. And I didn't bring the president along with me in my planning. I just announced it one day in our advisory group, and he immediately came down the hall and said, well, I'm not going to support that plan. So I got furious. I was so upset. I had devoted so much of my energy and time into how we were going to make things work. And I had a different way of running it. I really did. A new way to go. So I stewed on this for a little while. I almost cried, but I'm not a crier. I got really mad. And I just stormed down the hall. Now, I do not advise this. On impulse, I walked down the hall and said, I quit. And he said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know, but I've got to do this, and if I'll just do it someplace else. Well, then as I go back to my office, I realized no one's going to hire me because there weren't any jobs. People were laying people off, not hiring people. I don't care how good you were. So I thought, well, I don't have any choice. I guess I'm just going to have to go do this myself. So I was able to negotiate with them in my out clause to buy 3 accounts that I knew were going with me anyway. So I started with 3 accounts, and I knew how to run them. And so from day one, we had billing clients, and then we just started growing from there. And then the rest is a lot of history.
So very aggressive. A very aggressive move to quit in the middle of a recession.
I was crazy.
And I mean, being in the financial services industry, you took money out of the IRA, which they say no. So you did some things that were totally aggressive and against the grain, and you were willing to take that risk. What do you think in 1989 really prepared you for that risk? What had you done in the past that set you up, and how did that kind of lead into the early years of T3?
I guess it's also part of my DNA. I've always been a bit of a risk taker. When there was an opportunity, my mom used to always say, the brass ring only comes around so many times, and you better grab it or it may never come back again. And I lived by that. Even that job I took in Atlanta, like I told you, I could have gone back into my craft, what I did. I was going to work at an ad agency. But that opportunity came along, and it was kind of risky because I never did anything like that. But I thought, this is going to be interesting. I've got to do this. And so I did. But all along the way, I can just remember thinking, I'll try that. I'll do that. And you take risk, and then you start to realize that if they don't work, you can fix it. Hopefully, unless it's a ridiculous risk and you're threatening your life or something. But I just would do those things. Even in card games, all the time, I was just kind of a risk taker, you know. So that's what it really kind of boiled down to, is that I was willing to take that risk, but it was always a measured risk to a certain extent, not foolhardy. Because again, I knew that I knew how to run accounts profitably. So I was just taking the knowledge I had, but the tough part was, okay, you wake up the next day and it's your deal, 100%, you change completely. I cannot explain it. There's a difference in working for somebody. As good as you are, as hard as you work for them, to the day that you open the door and say, oh my gosh, it's me. I'm in charge here. Everything depends on what I do, how I lead, and my tenacity, or how my ability is going to be to make a profit. So it's a tough shift in a lot of ways that you can't prepare for until you do it.
So you took your past experience in business strategy, in the creative side of art, and on top of that, I think just your entrepreneurship and your entrepreneurial spirit, and you take it into T3 and you jump in and you start landing accounts, and you have this amazing success the largest woman-owned advertising agency.
Well, that wasn't
in the US.
until later, but yes.
But you obviously showed signs early. So tell me about kind of what that metamorphosis looked like for your company to get you to that point. Because you did some creative T3 and under is a great example. But tell me about kind of the early years and your process of getting T3 to this big behemoth.
Well, part of it was really the original business plan I put together, because you mentioned this. We wanted to have extraordinary strategy, understand the clients in game, measure everything, and put on a creative spin that would differentiate the clients and kind of get them to move into areas maybe they wouldn't have done before. Because we would always back it up, we're going to measure this. Well, what happened though, which was just the luck of being in Austin, was in 1992, we got our first opportunity to work with Dell. Dell was the Wild West back then. And we just kind of jumped in and started working on projects and making it up as we would go. And then one day I was in a meeting in 1994 and Michael Dell walked in and said, we're going to start selling on the internet because it perfectly fits our direct model. And so all eyes were raised, and I ran back to the office and I had a few guys who were kind of geeky that were playing games and doing strange things, I thought. And I said, all right, guys, you're going to have to help me figure this out. And so we started putting together people that embraced this new thing. Well, it all sounds glamorous and wonderful when you fast forward, but it wasn't so glamorous and wonderful at the time. And most advertising agencies thought if you did direct mail, direct marketing, or internet marketing, you were what was called below the line. And nothing you did was worthy of an award. It was ugly. It was just kind of heavy lifting stuff. But what I loved about it is we were able to experiment with things that nobody was doing. And we started this huge innovation kind of mentality that everything could be done, and how would we get there and who we were going to hire and finding people to do these jobs. So we worked back and forth with Dell, and it was just an interesting partnership as we grew that whole industry. It was serendipitous in many ways. Had I not been here at the right place and right time, I probably wouldn't have done that. Because, again, most ad agencies didn't think much of it. And it was kind of ugly in the early days. The colors we could use, the design, everything was just very rudimentary. And, of course, as time went on, it became the driver for everything.
You just used the word serendipitous, which I think is a really great word to describe Austin in the early 90s.
It was.
So tell me a little bit about coming out of that recession and then watching the tech side explode and Austin become more than just kind of a civic government capital.
Yeah.
I mean, how did that happen? Because you played a role in it. You weren't just along for the ride. I think T3 had something to do with it.
We really did. And, I didn't think about it at the time so much. But I went to a dinner party probably in 1990, maybe, where Ross Perot was speaking. And he came to Austin and gave a call to arms to all of us and to the state that we had to shift out of a petroleum-based economy into more technology. And that was going to be the future of Texas. And so here we saw, like some of these companies had already started making a little footprint to Austin, not headquarters, but Motorola, IBM. Then we had the Semitex and all these things that started happening that started to pave the way for this technology boom. And then Dell was here, and Dell was never really what I would call a technology company, but they built on the talent here. And they built on who was being assembled here in Austin. And what Dell really was a brilliant marketing company, which was perfect. Yeah, and they still are. So that was kind of the beginnings of how all this stuff happened. And we embraced it rather than running from it, because I saw it as the future too, and the people that I assembled in the team. And I had wonderful people that work with me. I mean, I cannot tell you how fortunate I was to find so many talented people that shored up my weaknesses, that understood things that I could never understand, and were willing to take these risks with me and try things.
There's a moment in your business where 3 of your key employees all have children around the same time.
Yeah, actually, then it became 4. Yes, 4. And this is now 30 years ago, because the oldest one, I just talked to the mom the other day, just turned 30.
That's amazing.
I know. And he was one of the first ones to come up there. Yes, this was an amazing thing that happened. Kind of a think tank solution, to be honest. So here they come. They're all working on the Dell business. All key to me, because they were already in key roles there. But ironically, and I laugh and say there must have been an ice storm that year or something, because I don't know how they got pregnant within such a short amount of time, but it happened. So here they are, one by one, coming in my office and wanting me to be happy for them as they were going to go off and have a family. Well, of course I was happy for them. But then as soon as they'd walk out the door, I'd go, damn, what am I going to do if she leaves? I cannot lose her right now. I mean, that whole deal is depending on this and this project, whatever. So I came up with this, it was insane, really, idea, because nobody was doing anything like this. And so I called them in there and I said, all right, I don't want to lose any of you. Let's try something. Why don't you just bring the babies up here to work and we'll all take care of them? Well, we were in an unorthodox office building. We were in an old historic home, in Austin, and we could do what we wanted. There were no rules there, but what I wanted to do. So they said, oh, no one does that. That's not going to be safe. We can't do that. And my attorney found out about it and had a fit.
I bet.
And he said, you can't do that. That's too much liability. And I said, Doug, you just watch me. We're going to try this. And one by one, down to the last one who almost didn't do it, all 4 of them came back. And we had what I called the romper room. And they all came together, and we had bassinets and playpens and toys and all this stuff. And we all just kind of rolled up our sleeves and made it happen. And then at one point we got very specific about it, with very specific rules and contracts with the parents and all this stuff, because men brought their kids too. And so we said at a certain age they have to go. This is what we're going to do. This is what we provide. This is your liability. The whole thing was set up. And at the end of it, by the time I sold the company, I believe we were at 110 children who'd come through the program.
That's amazing.
And it really was.
Yeah.
Because it changed the whole culture of the company. And the funny thing was that some people came to me during this time frame and said, well, we don't have children, or our children are grown up, but my dog is like my child, and I don't like leaving her at home. And so we said, okay, we'll try the dogs. So we had dogs up there, and we had the babies, and it was just a free-for-all. But, we had rules for the dogs eventually, too, because that got a little out of control at times. But, it was just all kind of this, I don't know, it just created this environment that we're a family, but we work really hard. And just because you have children and dogs and things going on in your life doesn't mean we don't keep going and work hard. But we're going to help you get through different phases and help things be as good as they can, So that's kind of was the philosophy of how a lot of our culture was built.
So you did a lot of amazing cultural things. You built a business up from 1989 to when did you sell?
2019, into 2019.
So a long history there. What did the second half of T3 look like? What were the challenges and things you learned in that time?
Well, the first part was really kind of just, you kind of go through phases in companies. Everybody talks about, oh, you made it to 2 years, oh, you made it to 5 years, and you kind of go through these milestones. One of the biggest things that we had to deal with was we were grappling with technology all the time. So that means that everybody who came in the company had to have the newest, best, and greatest technology. Well, that was really ugly, because I would get, here come my IT people we hired. You have to do this many laptops, you got to do this and this, and it would be like $50,000 check. And I go, I don't want to do that. That's horrible. But no, you need to roll this equipment. So we did the coolest thing. Dell, who was our client, came in, and they were looking at our overhead factor, trying to help us become more efficient, and like no other client would have. And they came in and they said, what is this? Why don't you lease your technology? And I said, what? We're too small for that. The big companies I know do that. No, you can do it. It changed our entire lives, because then you just put it like the light bill, and we just rolled equipment every 2 years. And everybody had new stuff. And so people would come to work for us and go, oh, wow, I have a brand, when Macs came, I have the newest Mac, or I have this, or I have that. Because we wanted everybody to have no barriers to be able to do anything they needed to keep up or ahead of marketing in the world, really. So it was just that was a big lesson we learned. How do you manage your technology? But we had to.
So at some point you get to kind of a success level and you decide, hey, this makes sense. So you sell T3. And after T3, some people go away and they disappear for a while, disappear from the limelight. You're the exact opposite. You run to it, and some of the things you're already involved in, and then some other things you added to your plate are really fascinating. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of the past few years and where we are presently. One of the biggest things you have going on is the work that you're doing for the University of Texas. So you're a distinguished alumnus at the school, which is amazing. You served as president of the Texas X's a couple years ago.
And still on the board.
So you're very involved from the alumni standpoint. And then you started 2 programs, Women Who Mean Business and Texas Trailblazers. I'd love to give you a chance just to tell us about what those programs are.
Well, can I run back? I didn't answer one thing. I'm going to say one thing, then we're going to go right back to that. So what happened to T3 was we started really becoming leaders in technology, and we were still a small agency in the overall scheme of things. But because we had these skills that almost no one had, and with the track record we did, we started growing so many national clients. And that was when we really turned the corner. Big risk. I mean, and there were bad recessions and we would lose business and all these things, but we were so high in innovation. Even Forrester Research named us one of the top 5 innovation agencies in the world. Can you believe?
That's amazing.
It was. Yeah. But we focused on that. And so that's how we got UPS. That's how we got Allstate. That's how we got Marriott Corporate. I mean, because we were offering things and we were lean and mean and smart and creative. And we were just offering things that a lot of competitors couldn't. So they would bring us in, and before you knew it, we would end up taking over like all the digital stuff. So it was an interesting trajectory of how we got from kind of small to medium to large. But back to where we are now. So what I have done at UT was kind of interesting because when I was working full-time at T3, I've been on boards, I've been corporate boards, all this stuff. I didn't have time to be over at UT all the time. It can suck you in, But one by one, I started getting more involved in what was going on. And I would see needs and I would see things happening. So during COVID, I saw what was happening in the workplace. Women were dropping out at alarming rates. And it's all statistic. It's there. We saw it. And so I went to the president, Jay Hartzell at the time, and said, I'd like to do something about this. I want to teach a women's leadership program to women who have over 10 years of experience. They're already in leadership roles, but we want to take them to the next level and keep them engaged so we don't lose them in the workforce because they're already so talented, and then they would drop out. So we were able to do this through executive education at McCombs, and now we're heading into our 6th cohort this fall, and the results have been stunning. What we're doing is working. 47% have gotten either promotions, taken over big jobs, or changed into huge new roles in leadership. We have a 97% net promoter score over 5 things. That's big.
It's unreal.
I love that. I mean, I told you I like to measure things. So we are seeing a huge amount of success. And we bring in all these interesting outside speakers, and I teach with another woman, Lynn Utter, who is a big corporate person. I'm a big entrepreneur, and we kind of come together and teach our leadership things together. So it's been very successful, and we're very excited to continue that. But then this other thing happened. So as I was, spending more time on campus and doing some guest lectures, also as president of Texas X's, I started meeting with more of the student groups and some of the scholarship students and some of the student organizations. And I was watching those students, and I was so amazed at their capabilities, how incredibly bright they are. I mean, let's be honest, today to get in the University of Texas, you're a top student. And so I said, wow, I wonder if there was some way I could take a lot of this leadership training and parlay that into juniors and seniors at UT. And at first I kind of shied away from it because I thought, they haven't been in the workplace. This is going to be hard to do. But the more I started talking to them and the more I interviewed people, the more I realized that it was time to do this. So I found out it had never been done at UT in the way I wanted to do it, because I wanted male and female in this, juniors and seniors, And I wanted to cross the entire university in all programs. So a lot of the specific schools like Moody and Macomb, some of the bigger schools do have good leadership tracks and programs, but this was designed to reach across to architecture, to engineering, to the art students, to liberal arts, to economics and liberal arts and foreign studies and social work and Moody students and Macomb students in business. And so we were able to accomplish that. And we had an incredible pool of applicants that came in. All this is like a total startup. I mean, the wheels are turning while we're taking applications, and I funded the program to start it with an endowment to make sure it happened. And off we're running. And so on August 26th, they all walk in for their first class. And honestly, I don't get nervous very often when I speak or when I'm doing stuff because I know my stuff pretty well and I have so much experience. But they have such high expectations, and I want this to be fantastic for them. Well, just like for the women. But it's going to be interesting to see how they absorb this, what we do with it, and how they may help shape this, because they're at the inaugural class. And we named it Texas Trailblazers. It hadn't been used at UT, believe it or not. We just designed a logo. I mean, I'm really in startup mode.
Yeah.
It's like starting from scratch with a new company. But UT's been very supportive, been excellent to work with. And so we're just going to kick off and see where we go.
And if someone wants to find out more about this, I think gaygaddis.com, on the About page, there's a Women in Leadership, and there's
the Texas Trailblazers.
Yes.
And we will be accepting new applications for Trailblazers starting after the first of the year. And with the women's program, we start usually in the spring for the next cohort. So we're just about finished with filling this last cohort. We have, well, I'm not sure we have a place left. We may have 1 or 2 places left. I'm not sure yet because I just looked at the roster. And they're all handpicked. So, we're same thing with the students. It's not just who got there first. We're selective to make sure that they fit the criterion that we're looking for to make the cohort really cohesive.
I love this. I love that you're giving back to the university. You're doing so much for them. They have to be so appreciative of the programs and things that we're doing. It should be. Yeah. I want to take this in a little bit different direction. It was a couple years ago. I was at the Thompson Conference Center, and you were presented an award, the Richard Weekly Award from the Texas Business Leadership Council, and they had some videos, a lot of great people there. And after the event, you had books, Cowgirl Power, you had out there, and you had some artwork. And I just happened to buy a small painting of yours called You Can't Make It Up that you painted in 2021. I keep it in my office to remind me that I need to get outside and see those sunsets and make sure I don't miss that with my family and my life. So thank you for being such a great artist. I want to talk about this because Texas Monthly featured you as one of the 10 artists to collect now, hence why I collect you. No, it's great. It's great. But I want to learn a little bit about you going back to your artistic roots and when this whole painting thing came back.
Yeah, it was really kind of surprised me. I told you I have an art degree. Studied to be a fine artist. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Studio Art. So I have the traditional training of an artist. And pretty good. I was a good student and I was good in college. But immediately, like I said, I had to make money. And it's very difficult unless you have a patron saint or somebody out there, who'll come in and fund you as an artist. So it's difficult to make a living as a fine artist out of school, very. And so I had to go to work. I was putting my husband through school, blah, blah. So off I went doing that. And in 2015, I was driving home from the office, and there was an old Azel Art Supply of MLK. And it's a left turn to go in there when I'm going home. Well, I took the left, no place to park, but I've squeezed in somewhere. And I decided I was just going to walk in there. I said, it might do me good just to smell the paints and the colors and the oil paint and all that. I just want to walk in the door. So I walked in. And before I knew it, I had a basket, and I bought some canvases, and I bought some brushes and acrylic paint instead of oil, and an easel, a small easel. And loaded it up in the back of my Jeep. Off I go to the ranch. So this is a Friday afternoon. And I unload all this stuff in the yard because I didn't have a studio or any place. So I just thought, I'll just paint outside, why not? And my husband came up, he said, well, what's all that stuff? And I said, well, I'm just going to have a little fun. And I just want to paint again. I miss it. And he said, well, that's good for you. You know, that'll be very relaxing. And, you know, you just have fun and don't worry about it because you're never going to sell a thin dime. Don't get your head on that right now. Just enjoy. Okay. So I started painting again. And I got very frustrated. I tried all kinds of things, very detailed, very, you know, because I can do very, very detailed, realistic things. Then I went wild abstract from Jackson Pollock to just other crazy stuff. Just out there, just kind of, but it was fun because I was outside. And so I could throw paint around and splash stuff and it didn't matter, right? So it gave me freedom. You know, I was just out and it was hot and windy and all kinds of terrible conditions, but I just kept doing it. But I wasn't satisfied. I felt like I'm not there yet. And it really hit me one afternoon. It was getting kind of late and I was still out there. I looked up at the sky and I thought, what am I doing? There it is. There's the inspiration. And immediately I just started putting down the colors. And I walked away from it and I said, you know what? I think I'm in my groove. I think this is it. And so from that point on, I started observing the skies, and I'm a sky gazer. And I looked at skies at night, early morning and evening, and clouds and all these things. And so I still paint that. Occasionally I deviate a little bit, but 99% of everything I do has some sort of landscape or skyscape that is based on what I see in the whole country. And it is stunning. So this little painting captures the colors I saw in the sky that evening, because sunsets can be so beautiful. I mean, and a lot of people just look up and say, oh, that's pretty. But if you really analyze it, there's hot pink, there's purples, there's oranges, there's yellows, there's the blue in the sky and neons. And so this got me thinking. When I first got my paint, I only bought what I would call flat acrylics, which is lots of colors, lots of good colors. But I couldn't get the color I wanted because skies are vibrant to the point that it's like neon. It's like, you know, fluorescent. So I bought fluorescent neon paint and I started mixing it in. I went, wow, that's it. That I'm getting the colors I want. But then I realized, talking to the golden paint makers, they said, well, we can't guarantee that these fluorescents or neons are going to last like the flat color. And so they may fade at some point. So I started working with some other artists, and there's a spray that we use, or you can do it flat, you can spread it on, that protects it. It's got a UV protection on it, so that those colors will not fade over time. So that became my insurance around why I would even be willing to continue to use that. But I don't always use it, but a lot of times to get that color I want, I have to draw for those paints. And so it's been just a real journey. But the most amazing thing was I had met a pretty amazing art dealer in New York, and I was at a gallery there, and I sheepishly walked up to her because, you know, I hadn't shown anywhere or done anything. And I just asked her, I said, would you ever look at my art? And she's this kind of tough New Yorker, and she said, yeah, you can send me some stuff. Just send it to my email. So I did, and she called me back and she said, I kind of like what you're doing. And she, on her own expense, brought her family, her 2 kids and husband down, and they stayed at our ranch and watched me paint and picked out paintings. And she said, if you will continue and develop enough, she said, I think I can get you a one-woman show. I almost fainted. But it wasn't guaranteed. You got to keep painting. Well, I did. I painted. So I had this body of work. I went to see the woman where I'd first met her, and she looked at my work, and this other woman, Rebecca, was there. And this other woman, talk about taking a risk, who owned the gallery, said, okay, if Rebecca thinks it's good enough, I'm going to give you a one-woman show. I literally, at that point, just almost fainted. I mean, I walked back to my apartment in New York, and I was skipping down the street like on the yellow brick road. I was so excited. I was like a child. I mean, like, oh my gosh, I'm an artist. You know? And so then panic, get everything ready. And then here we go, first night, terrified. What if no one likes it? You know, and so, but the New York critics were kind to me, and I sold 22 paintings in that show. And so when I got my first check from the gallery, my husband wasn't there, and I called him and I said, listen to this. My first check is $13,233.79. And he said, well, that's pretty good. And I said, yeah, it's worth more than a thin dime, don't you think? And that was my first check. So from that point on, I've sold art.
Yeah.
hundreds of paintings, small, big, huge, triptychs, diptychs, giant 10-foot paintings, small ones like this. And so it's just, I love it. And sometimes I can devote more time to it than others, depending on my schedule and what I can do. But we built a gallery and a studio at the ranch, so I'm not outside so much anymore, although I still like that, because it's called plein air, if you're a planner or a painter. But it's just been really a salvation for me in a way to go back to my roots, because I started painting as a child. And we talk about your superpowers and what you're good at. I always tell people to go back, what were you doing well as a child? Or did you do leadership things? Did you paint? Did you like to write? Did you like to, speak? Were you in plays? Or were you the best athlete? What were you good at? And those are the things that you go back to and say, okay, that's who I really am. And if you can return to any of those things, you'll sometimes find as you get older, you have a different lens on it. And you see things differently than you would have as a child, and your work's different.
I love that. I love it. Perfect chance for us to take a break. Gay, your journey from Liberty, Texas to boardrooms to brushstrokes is remarkable. Before we look ahead at what's next for Austin and your work, let's pause for a quick message from our sponsor.
In every episode of Austin Eras, we uncover the city's history, vibrant present, and bold future. Just like Austin, your financial journey is a story worth crafting. At Collective Advisors, led by Adam Flagg, Managing Partner, Senior Wealth Advisor, and Certified Financial Planner Professional, your story is in skilled hands. From investments to retirement planning, Adam and his team bring together a collective of dependable professionals to help you build, maintain, and enjoy financial security. Start your financial legacy today at collectiveadvisors.com or call 512-467-1923. Investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
And we're back to the Austin Eras podcast. Let's look ahead at the next chapter of Gay's work here in Vision for Austin. I think one thing that gets overlooked sometimes in a fast-growing state like ours is the resources. And one of the things that you're very passionate about is water policy and conservation. Can you give us a little bit of a primer about what water is in Texas and why it's so important to you?
Well, I have a long history with this. First of all, my dad was a civil engineer and was involved with water issues around the Trinity River where we grew up, and testified at the state. And he talked about water a lot. And so that was something just kind of the back of my childhood. But then later, I was appointed to the LCRA board, Lower Colorado River Authority, and I chaired the water committee for several years. And I got very involved in water, where we moved it, where it came from, if it didn't rain, droughts, floods, all the things that happen. And I started to realize that, we would have studies. Texas's population, and this was years ago, Texas population is growing like this. Our water supply isn't keeping up. What are we going to do? So LCRA did a lot of planning around that. But I watched this and became more and more concerned through the years, because here we are, just and growing even bigger and more rapidly than we had anticipated back then. And so I thought, I'm going to get involved in this. So being a member of the Texas Business Leadership Council, I convinced them that we needed to put water as one of our issues to follow and be influential in. So I have worked on water policy with the skeleton crew of people for a long time. And finally, last session, we got the first, I would say, significant money we've ever been allocated. And when I say we who want water to be well used and stored and transferred around the state, there's a lot of issues to be solved. And we aren't even halfway there yet, or maybe a third. But we're moving in the right direction if we can just keep the legislature and the state focused on this, because we could run out of water. And I tell people, how would you like to have your company here and your whole team turns on the water and it's not there because we don't have enough water to get to you? And that is not far-fetched and a threat. It could happen. And especially in certain parts of the state, we're very, very dry. Texas doesn't rain that much. You have to think about the coast where I grew up. Yeah, but you go north, west, even more west, no, we don't get it. And even these recent floods here, which were devastating in so many ways, just devastating, then people forget. See, because you get the water supplies up and then they forget about it. So it has to be, we were in a drought before then. So now attention is being paid to it, but we can't take our eye off it. And I am relentless about it. I will not give up until I feel like a lot of things are solved. We need to solve desalinization. It's expensive, but there's got to be more technology to make it cheaper. And so all those things have to be studied. We have got to be cohesive as a state and where we're going to get the water from. And the Colorado River isn't going to always do it for Central Texas. You know what happens. So, and of course the rest of the state. But we have done some reservoir work, and LCRA's been doing some of that. That helps. But they're expensive, and people have to pass these bonds and do all this stuff to make these things come to pass. So we're getting some money for infrastructure out of the legislature because we had enough money to start moving some. So I'm encouraged, but the fight is far from over.
It feels like Texas has enough money from a surplus standpoint. They have the ability to lead as a state, but sometimes investing in certain infrastructure that's not immediate is not the top priority for the legislature. And the
people don't see it as a priority unless you understand it.
Yeah.
They say, oh, well, we've got water, turn on, look at those golf courses, watering like crazy, And so, and speaking of that, that takes a lot of water.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's a lot of things that take a lot of water in Texas. So.
Well, even the beer business. Lots of things. Big industry takes a lot of water.
I want to totally shift gears now and talk a little bit about what you kind of view Austin as currently and into the future. What do you think Austin gets right for creative risk takers like you? And what do they get wrong? Because I think there's a lot of enterprise, a lot of startups, this culture that we have here. Sometimes I feel great about it. Sometimes I feel a little conflicted about it. What do you like or dislike about this environment we have today?
Well, Austin's it's grown so much. And then kind of put the brakes on. We were just in this ridiculous go-go time. Real estate went out the roof. We've got to get ourselves back to kind of a norm, is what I think. Because people are not going to move here, and they're not going to start businesses here when everything is so expensive. And every time you wake up, you hear that taxes are going up again. And that's not healthy for business. And a lot of businesses are really concerned about some of those things. And so there's other places you can go. And especially when you have a different way of working than we used to, where so many people can work virtually, so many people can have different options. You don't have to come to Austin to do anything. You may live in Florida, you may live somewhere, I don't know. But I'm always amazed how people can do so well. I like the in-person stuff. That's how I thought innovation really worked for us. But there's a lot of things that can be done, and you don't have to spend that much money, because how are you going to make a profit when your overhead and your real estate and everything is so high that it just chews into all your efforts? So I think it's putting a pause on people wanting to start things here, companies staying, companies growing, and we still have a lot that are here and they're going to be here and they love Austin and they're part of our culture and they're going to stay, but we have to be more realistic about what's going on, I think, and take a tough look at how. And Austin doesn't care about business like some other places do. Let's be honest.
Not always.
They do, but they don't. It's not necessarily always a business-friendly environment. Although I found, this is funny, when I first started T3, nobody wanted to come here. It was a sleepy town. Nothing was going on. And then and clients didn't want to come here. We had to go to them. But then as time went on, Austin became more of a cool place and more interesting, more things to do, more great restaurants. And so all those things built into making hiring people here and bringing clients here more desirable. So that played in our hand for a long time. And we were able to grow a lot because Austin was doing well and had a lot of interesting things to offer and a unique environment. Mm-hmm. So, it still has a lot of that stuff, thank goodness. But I hate it when I watch things that are old traditions just kind of go away. And the old restaurants and the old dives and all that stuff, it just breaks my heart when we lose them because it makes Austin special.
What I think I'm hearing you say, too, is that sometimes it's easier to be the next big thing than actually the big thing. And once you get to be the big thing, it's hard to stay at the top.
It always is.
I think Austin's experiencing that challenge based on everything we're talking about.
We were
today.
The cool kid in town, in the world. Everybody wanted to come here, and then you kind of overstep yourself a little bit sometimes.
Well, let me follow up that question, and I assume you've been here long enough in Austin that you'd never consider leaving. But what would it take to keep you here the next 15 years? What would it take to push you out the door?
Well, I'm kind of 1 foot out the door, as you know, but I'm very much an Austinite. And I don't claim that Marble Falls or Burnett is my hometown. But our ranch, which I run, is between those two communities. And I have to say, it's very easy for me to do shopping, for me to do a lot of things in those little towns. And so I love it out there, and it's a place for me to kind of reset and, not be overwhelmed. I live downtown now when I'm in Austin, and I am still very concerned about, some of the population we have in Austin that makes it dangerous downtown. And I have to be very cautious. But one thing for sure, I don't think the University of Texas is going anywhere. And I don't think the government is going anywhere. And I don't think a lot of the interesting people and friends I have are really going anywhere. So this is going to be kind of like always home to me. And being able to, I'm literally walking distance from the University of Texas. And I plan to be doing work there for a long time. And so I'll be around.
You said that Ross Perot said back in the 90s that you can't run this state on oil forever, and you kind of agreed with that mentality. So what's your vision for the next generation of Texas leaders?
They have to be prepared to not only innovate, but I mean truly accept change. A lot of people don't like change. We really don't, to be honest. Everybody kind of likes things to be kind of the way it was. And then here comes this change agent or something really tough that turns things upside down. Economies go up and down. It's tough. You just have to be very resilient, and you have to make decisions quickly. People who dilly-dally around, as I say, and not make a decision when they need to, sometimes the opportunity or the money or everything is over. And that was one thing I learned from Dell. We would look at market opportunities, and they would say, get 80% right, to hell with the 20%. We've got to move now, or we're going to lose that opportunity. So I've kind of had that mentality forever here that, don't try to get everything perfect before you do something. Jump in, make mistakes, figure it out. And you will if you have the tenacity and you have the right people around you. You have to find the right people in any endeavor that you do that are going to help guide you and bring in the things that you don't have. And that is a secret to everything. And I'm always saying, gosh, if I'm going to start this, I have to find the right people. And that's what I do immediately before anything new. I say, we've got to find the right people to make this happen.
I'm going to jump to a couple fun questions because you touched on it a second ago. And we'll just jump in and just get to know you in terms of what it's like to know Gay outside of the office or outside of the business in the boardroom.
I'm kind of the same everywhere.
Well, you did mention weird or quirky traditions and things in Austin. What's something that Austin has to work to preserve that you're worried about? What is something that is you hope never fades?
Well, this is a funny thing. So I don't live too far from the old Texas chili parlor.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And recently the owner died. And we in our little neighborhood are concerned that it may not make it because it's in a very desirable location from a real estate standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
But you walk in that place and you walk back in time and nothing has changed. The food is very sensibly priced and the drinks and everything. And it's got all this old stuff on the walls. And I just feel at home when I go in there. I mean, it's things like that. I'm glad Schultz's is still around. They've been around since the 1800s. And then, we still have some wonderful things that UT brought to us. We are so fortunate to have the Bass Concert Hall.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that are in Austin that are just because, some of it's because of the government, the state government we have, and some of it's because of UT, and some of it is the industry and the companies that have invested here. And, we have some just great things to do, and the parks and all that are just beautiful, and we can't lose those because that is really, I love going to Zilker Park. I like walking around there. I love the Umlauf Gardens there. Just things that are unique to Austin that we cannot lose, that there's not one in every city.
There's not. One thing that's important to Austin is music.
Oh, so yes.
I always have a conversation about music with every guest. So what's an album or artist that reminds you of Austin? What's something that if you think about your era of Austin, what is it that you
way
love?
Back. Well, no one can go through life and live in Texas without thinking Willie Nelson kind of carved a place in our hearts, because what was interesting about him is he goes way back, but then he kind of morphed into different music and things and stayed relevant, which I think is such an important trait, because many wonderful bands have been here, great musicians, and we have been so fortunate that many started here, and we've got some and we've got some kind of cool bands that came from Austin.
We do.
But I appreciate those that some are a flash in the pan, to be honest, and they feel a need at a time. But anyone who can reinvent themselves and continue on, now he's celebrated his 90th birthday, but is interesting to me, because that really says that they love music and they're willing to adapt to what their audience is interested in, as well as what they want to write and produce. So that's an interesting example to me.
Do you have a favorite live music experience you've ever had here?
Yes, I have to tell you, going to the old Continental Club, I love it. It is small. If that place ever goes, though, we've lost a gem. And it's wonderful. And I'll never forget when Lyle Lovett came and played there. I love Lyle. I love his music. Even though some of it's now years old, I can still listen to it and I just love all the words and how he's delivery and everything. But we heard a concert that Lyle did for a small group in the Continental Club, and it was just one of the nicest experiences. It wasn't that long ago, but it was really cool.
What's a funny or quirky encounter you've had with the?
Oh, and I love Leon Bridges too, by the way.
Yeah, so my daughter and I saw Leon Bridges at the Austin City Limits Festival last year, and just sunset. Anytime you have that show right when the sun's going down, so good.
I know. He's just got a wonderful voice, and his delivery's beautiful, and just the words, the meaning in his words, it's really unique, and I really love him. And there's so many others, and I've started becoming a real follower of Sun Radio. I don't know if you ever heard of Sun Radio, but I listen to it almost all the time when I'm not listening to podcasts or other news or something. And I've kind of kept up with, and I can't name them all necessarily, but there's a lot of local artists and a lot of really good singer-songwriters they feature on that station. And they play old stuff too, but I really enjoy it because I feel like I'm kind of keeping up with some interesting music that is in genres that I like.
Yeah, I love that. Now, tell me about, with all of the things you've done around Austin, what's an interesting celebrity encounter you've had here? Any interesting people you run across over the years?
Oh, yeah, you can't believe it. I had an interesting encounter with Gwyneth Paltrow here a few years ago at one of the ACL Fest or something. It was one party we all went to downtown, and we kind of hit it off. And so I actually saw her in Italy last summer, and we remembered each other. Of course, I remembered her, but we ended up sitting near each other at dinner at this place, and so she came over and visited with her husband. And it was kind of a nice thing. And Maria Shriver, who and I are not necessarily always politically aligned, but I have to say that she became a friend of mine a long time ago. She was the first person on the Today Show, the first person anywhere, but on the Today Show to break the T3 and understory.
Oh, really?
Yes. And they found out about it through Working Mother magazine, and then they broke it on national television. And from that point on, that story just kept growing and growing. And then she interviewed me again on it a few years later, and then I did her book signing at my apartment a few years ago. And then I take her newsletter, she takes mine, and we kind of talk a little bit. But it's just, that was an interesting thing to happen from here. And then I met, so many interesting political folks, and, even back to Ann Richards. What a character. Ann was probably one of the funniest people I've ever met in my entire life. And I still tell her stories, because I have this kind of East Texas, funny Texas accent like Ann did, and I can get by telling her stories like some people can't. And I always get a laugh. In fact, this was so funny. So Christy Hefner, who took over the Playboy industry, or the whole dynasty from her dad, and I were at a dinner in Washington, D.C. one night, and I told an Ann Richards story, and it's funny. And we were all sipping on some Chardonnay, I believe, and I got to the punchline. She had just taken a sip, and she spit the wine all the way across the table. She was laughing so hard. And everybody was laughing, so we didn't care. But it was so funny. But, like I said, Ann just had these stories that were just priceless that people should remember.
With all the leadership work that you're doing, what is the best leadership advice you can give a 25-year-old founder, entrepreneur that's here in Austin and wants to lead? What do you tell them?
Okay. Surround yourself with the absolute best people you can. I don't care what you have to pay. You've got to do it. You sacrifice everything to get the right people on the team. Know that you're better than you think you are. Get your confidence up. Not arrogance, confidence. You can do it. And finally, know your money. I've seen so many entrepreneurs and business people who thought they had a handle on their money, but they really didn't. And you have to understand it down to the penny. You got to understand exactly how everything works, how you make money, how you're going to spend your money, how you're going to, I bootstrapped my whole company, which is unheard of today. I still don't even believe I did it, but I did. But it's because I was always watching the money, always. And people lose their sight of it. But I have this phrase that just says, know the money. And I'm a staunch believer in that. And I've had entrepreneurs in my classes and things, and they'd say, when you told me about that, I thought I did know the money, but then I went back and realized I really didn't know it like I should. And I'm doing a lot better now because I'm really managing my money and my future better. So that's a big piece of advice that everybody thinks they know, but they may not.
Tell me about your legacy. What do you want your legacy to be when you think about what you've done here in Austin and beyond? How do you want to be remembered?
One of my good friends says you can't really write your legacy. And I believe that to be true because everyone's going to assume certain things and they're going to, take from it what they want. But at this point, I'm really motivated and feel compelled to build leaders. And I'm going to use a phrase that most people don't even know what it is, but I really truly believe there's a dearth of leadership, meaning there's a true lack of leadership. And yes, a lot of people are in leadership roles, but I mean the tough grit leadership it takes to really hang in there, have staying power, and make a difference. And then do good for other people because of it. One of the greatest things of a leader is being able to help and move other people along. And if you don't get that, then you're missing it. And that's the reward at the end. And so I look back on anything I can do to help somebody else find their way or to be a better person or to relax and enjoy life and be who they are and know who they are. I hope that's my legacy.
It's an amazing legacy. To be able to bring leadership into the city, into the state, I think means a lot.
And we will follow these people, and we do, because I want to know how you're doing.
Yeah.
Did that help you? How can we adjust? What are you doing that we have talked about or that you learned that is going to keep you hanging in there?
I have one final question, a little bit thoughtful, a little bit fun. Other people have answered Ann Richards, but you knew Ann Richards. So so if you could have dinner with one Austinite, living or dead, who would it be and why?
Well, that's interesting because there were so many wonderful people here. And you think back on all these people who started Cimitech, and the Longs, and, they did so much for culture. And, there's just so many great people that I knew along the way. And I was fortunate, to be honest, because even though I was really young here at UT, I was kind of new people in Austin. And I had a lot of friends I knew their parents. And I loved Harry Whittington. What a great man. I used to talk to Harry all the time, but I'd love to have dinner with Harry again. He died a few years ago, and that would be a treat to be able to sit down with him again and really talk to him in a different way than maybe I would have along the way, because you get older and you learn things.
Well, tell people about Harry and his legacy.
Well, he was a really interesting guy. He was an attorney, but had his own shop, and he was very involved in all things in Austin. I mean, he was just, we used to have all these people when Austin wasn't quite as big. Mm-hmm. He would call really the city fathers, Yeah. And these were people who involved themselves in, what was going to happen to real estate and how they developed that and what was going to happen with our financial institutions and who was going to support those and boards that they needed and just help build, the culture and, the wherewithal to make Austin whole and a good place, and then still involved in some of the government issues, still involved in some of the city politics. And so Harry was kind of one of those people. He was just kind of Austin, and he actually lived in a building when he and his wife first got married that was one of mine, one of my historic homes that I sold about a year ago. And so he was just kind of a fixture in Austin to me that saw all these changes and all these things, but always was with it. He went to his office every day, way up in years. He's kept going. He didn't give up. And, sometimes it's tough to do that, but he just as my husband would say, just put on the harness every day and got out there and did the good work, and so I had to admire him always for that.
Gay, thank you so much for being on the Austin Eras podcast. Your words, your stories, your fire, your insight, it was really fun.
It was fun.
It was great. And so for listeners that want to see your artwork, sign up for your excellent newsletter, learn more about your leadership programs, or follow along, we'll link everything in the show notes. And this has been another episode of the Austin Eras. Subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend who needs to hear this one.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Austin Eras, featuring Adam Flagg, is brought to you by Collective Advisors. Collective Advisors offers investment advisory services through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Guests on Austin Eras are not affiliates of CWM LLC, and opinions expressed by guests may not reflect those of CWM LLC. This show is intended for educational and entertainment purposes and is not intended to provide specific legal, tax, or other professional advice. For a comprehensive review of your personal situation, always consult with a qualified professional.